Hello and welcome to Tête-à-Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Diego Arria. He's a veteran Venezuelan politician, former representative to the United Nations. He joins us from Miami in Florida. Thank you very much, Mr. Arria.
Thank you, Mark.
When you heard the news on January 3rd that Nicolas Maduro had been taken by U.S. Special Forces, what was your initial reaction?
You know, I thought that I had to see again the news to see if it was really true that the special forces had captured Maduro and his wife in the army barracks. It was really an amazing thing to hear.
A few days later, it now appears that you have a Maduro regime without Maduro. No regime change. The president, his wife have been removed. However, his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, and the rest of the Chavista apparatus is still in charge. What's your take on those developments?
You know, when Maduro was apprehended, the immediate reaction is that the regime had fallen. And of course, it took very little time to find out that no, that there was, it was looked at from the United States point of view as the first phase of an operation. And like now you hear that the operation can be longer. Even today, President Trump said that it will be as long as it's necessary to stabilize, to develop the country for the profit of Venezuela and for the profit of the United States, which is something very confusing to me.
Do you believe that prior to this operation, there was a deal negotiated behind Maduro's back by Delcy Rodriguez, her brother Jorge, who is the president of the National Assembly?
You know, the operation was so clean that they give the impression that there was local cooperation to be able to achieve this objective. Yes, I believe that there was, I don't know what was Delcy Rodriguez, but it looks that she is the only one who has really benefit from the whole thing is being Ms. Rodriguez, who, as the second in command of Mr. Maduro, is as guilty as he is of a collection of crimes against humanity and narco trafficking, etc.
So, the fact that the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself, says we're working hand in hand with Delcy Rodriguez, what is your reaction to that?
You know, at least personally, I could, it was difficult for me to understand, but especially when a few minutes later, Ms. Rodriguez started criticizing openly and harshly President Trump and his administration. And then later, the same day, Ms. Rodriguez speaks, surrounded by the same team of gangsters that had been with Maduro during these last 25 years. She was saying that that she's sending message to cooperate to establish a regime of cooperation with the United States. So that's what we find today ourselves observing what's happening in Venezuela.
The U.S. is clearly there to seize the oil. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't even hide it, but he says the interim government, as he calls it, cooperates. I mean, you've been a long-time opponent of Hugo Chavez, of Nicolas Maduro. Does it shock you that the President of the United States says he's working with the Chavista like there was no Chavista regime?
You know, there are people who have come to the fore and saying, well, in a situation like this, first you have to control to be able to do this process in peace, and then we have to do some stabilizing the country, and that's why the most important member of the opposition, which is Maria Corina Machado, doesn't have what Trump says the respect from the country, which is absolutely not true. But this is what we find today, Mark. That at least I have to believe. I am forced to believe that there was a second phase coming up, But when I see Ms. Rodriguez surrounded by the whole team of Mr. Maduro, I begin to begin very concerned. How long is the transition going to last? Because meanwhile, yesterday, President Trump says we're getting 50 or 60 million barrels of oil from Venezuela, but he didn't say, and we have instructed them to liberate the political prisoners, which we have 1,000 of them. That has not been at all established.
Right, because around Delcy Rodriguez, at least in appearance, and for now, we have the two hardliners, as they know, Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. They are still there. Without them, the Rodriguez experience, if you want to call it this way, cannot succeed. Do you think they will go along, or eventually they could create trouble for her and for the Trump administration?
My own personal opinion is that they will create problems, especially the two persons you mentioned, Padrino and Cabello. Know that they have committed so many crimes that they could be subjected to international sanctions, etc. So they will do something to resist. And I see them very well established. And you see Cabello actually threatening the United States and criticizing what's going on, but not criticizing Ms. Rodriguez. So I wonder how Ms. Rodriguez is going to preserve order in Venezuela if she has a man like Cabello and Padrino against what is against the government, that according to President Trump, the Venezuelan government is cooperating with the United States in this transition.
So obviously, the Trump administration is willing to present this as the opposite of Iraq and Afghanistan, of state building and so on, kind of regime change by remote control. But do you think that things will get much more messy on the ground because of those tensions between the different factions on the ground?
Well, Mark, this reminds me, the Dominican Republic had a revolution years back, and the first day, the popular leader was called Juan Bosch, did not enter the palace as president, but they appointed the vice president, which was Mr. Balaguer, to ensure that the country will have a smooth transition. And Balaguer stayed president of the country for at least 15 or 20 years. I think that's the closest example of what we are living. I see that much more difficult in Venezuela when you see that the power of the regime is based on the arms, on the armed forces, and on the paramilitary groups that Mr. Cabello controls.
Are you concerned that there's no mention whatsoever of elections, except Trump saying, no, we don't want them for now? I mean, there's no concern about elections, about human rights.
I was very concerned that the president does not speak of the recovery of the freedom, recovery for Venezuela, or speaks of liberating the political prisoners, but speaks fundamentally of oil, like this was an oil operation, and which is absolutely unnecessary to remind, because we always had American companies exploiting oil in Venezuela. Now, of course, I understand the issue. He doesn't want the Chinese, the Russians, to have this operation in Venezuela. That's something completely different. And that, of course, is happening as we speak. But at the same time, this concern only about oil and not about the political prisoners give me at least a great concern. Why is he not talking, eventually the elections that which you mentioned, even though we had an election a year and a half ago where Ms. Machado got almost 72% of the votes. So the opposition is clearly the majority in the country.
The problem is that the opposition is mostly abroad. Just briefly, since we're running out of time, Maria Machado has been brutally, I should say, pushed aside by Donald Trump, says she doesn't have the respect, she can't control the situation. Would you say that maybe for her it's a blessing in disguise because she's been criticized for being very close to the United States, for calling for a military intervention? The fact that there is some distance between her and Donald Trump could maybe help her in the future if indeed, there is to be an election.
But you know, in Venezuela, the Venezuelan people were very happy to have the United States intervening because, you know, Mark, after 26 years, we have tried everything. We have had elections, we have manifestations, and we are never given up on the idea of recovering our freedom. That has been, you know, for a very long time, the position that we all have taken. And we see now, with great hope, that the Maduro decapitation, some people thought that would be enough. It cannot be enough because the government of Maduro was in charge of a gang, narco criminal terrorist gang. So you have to, in order to regain actually our freedom, you have to get rid of all of them, and that doesn't seem to me that what is in the plans or in the immediate plans that the U.S. administration has on my country.
So you still believe that Maria Corina Machado will eventually rule Venezuela?
Well, you know, when you said that the president disguise, I thought you meant that she will not have to face a harsh and transition. That might be the case, but she is undoubtedly. Mr. Trump can say that she is a very nice lady, but she doesn't have the support of the people. She has the support, like I said before, of more than 70% of the Venezuelans, even though we were not able to vote, the ones who were outside the country. So I believe that the only way that we will really have a possibility to regain democracy is if we had our own leadership elected by popular vote, which is the case of Ms. Machado.
Diego Arria, thank you very much for being our guest here on France 24. And thank you all for watching this edition of Tête à Tête. Stay tuned for more news.